Hi, today we're going to start our review series here on Lensvid of tripods and heads, and the first tripod that we are going to look at is the C3 from Genesis, a Polish company. This is actually a kit of an all-around tripod and a head made out of carbon fiber, which we received in this interesting looking bag. So let's take a look what we get inside. When we first got the C3, we didn't know exactly what to expect. We were not familiar with the Genesis brand before the review and had no idea what level of product we are going to get. However, as you will see later on in this review, we were actually pleasantly surprised. Genesis was founded about 6 years ago in Poland, and although it has yet to create a name for itself like some of the big players in the industry, it already has a nice line of products, including tripods, monopods, heads, sliders, and other video accessories, and even bags. The company's tripods are meant to be affordable, yet have a rich feature set and a decent quality. All are things that we are going to look at in this review. Tripods are relatively simple pieces of gear, with no electronics and a few moving mechanical parts. That doesn't mean that they are all created equal. Although some will probably not survive for long under stressful use, a good, well-designed tripod can survive for decades. Literally, 2 of our Gitsu tripods can easily pass as museum pieces, but despite their years they are still very much functional, with some minor DIY fixes mind you. The old tripod story was only meant to emphasize one thing. A good tripod can really last for a lifetime, so picking the right one in our view is an important decision. Now let's talk about construction. Unlike tripods of the past, which were mostly made out of metal and were quite heavy and bulky, many modern tripods started using carbon fiber, which comes in layers, 6, 8, and there are even some rare 10-layer tripods. The C3 has 8 layers and feels fairly sturdy, even when all the 4 leg sections are open all the way. More on this later. The C3 comes with a kit bowhead called BH34. This is a pretty straightforward unit with a diameter of, well, you guessed it, 34mm, which is rated at a somewhat unrealistically official max load of 18 kilograms. But even if this is an exaggeration, most common DSLR configurations should work perfectly fine with it. The locking knob is a bit small but has a good textured rubber coating, and typically it doesn't take too much turning to open and lock it down in place. Although the pen lock is pretty small and not rubberized, it is very smooth, and you also get the convenient angle markings for panoramas, which is pretty standard by now on most bowheads. The BH34 uses the same friction screw that many other bowheads, including much more expensive ones, apply these days. You can try and turn it with your finger, but it is much easier to use a small flat screwdriver. At any rate, we kind of hate this mechanism. It isn't specific to Genesis, it is just a poorly designed system. The one that we would like to see is a completely separate knob for friction control with numbers, just like you have on some advanced fluid heads, but this is probably something that might fit more higher-end heads anyway. The BH34 uses an Arca-Swiss type quick release plate, and although we personally prefer Manfrotto's RC2 system, the BH34 has 2 small but nice features that are lacking in some other similar heads. The first is a relatively large and wide plate, good for larger cameras, but maybe a bit less so for smaller mirrorless ones. The second is a D-ring with a 1/4 inch 20 screw, which is a real blessing and a big time saver. We can't tell you how annoying it is to always look for a way to lock those quick release plates that don't have the D-ring. Here is a breakdown of some of the C3 main features. For an all-around tripod that can open up to a fairly impressive height of 180 centimeters, including the head, a 1.7 kilogram weight is quite impressive, and lifting the kit up requires almost no effort. The legs are pretty thick at 28mm for the top of its 4 sections and about 17mm for the lowest section. Just for comparison's sake, our old Gitsu Studio tripod is 32mm on the upper section and about 24mm on the lowest of its 3 sections, so there is a clear difference here, which also translates into stability, as you can see in the demo, which we also shown on our tripod buying guide. However, our Gitsu is a studio tripod and it weighs almost twice as much as a C3, so there is no real surprise here. If we look at the other end of the spectrum, most travel tripods that we have been testing here for this series, with a few notable exceptions, have thinner legs and of course cannot get near the 180 cm max height of the all-around C3. So let's take a look at the C3 in action. We used the C3 for well over a month, both indoors and outdoors, and we really like the build quality and the lightweight of this kit. Although we would not consider this a pure travel tripod because of the folded length, which is just over 50 centimeters, it is still compact and portable enough to carry you using most medium and above camera backpacks, and more importantly, it will not add too much to your overall weight. In terms of stability, we have to admit that since this was the first tripod kit in this series that we received, and owning mostly studio and older tripod designs which are not exactly comparable, we thought that the tripod was actually pretty stable. However, after we received a few other tripods that we shall be looking at later on in this series, we do feel that Genesis actually has some room to improve upon here. It isn't that this tripod isn't stable, but when you see a relatively similar tripod which is visibly more stable, you understand that it is possible to do more in this respect. I do want to say, however, that although stability is a very important factor when choosing a tripod, there are ways to increase the tripod stability. And the best way to do this with the Genesis is to add weight under the tripods using a hook. Adding enough weight will make the tripod much more stable in our experience. One more thing that we think the Genesis should work on is the leg angle mechanism. You can see us struggling a bit with it on the video. You need to pull the leg back, press a button down, and then pull the unit until you hear a click. Let's just say that this mechanism isn't 100% perfect. Genesis are aware of this, and we hope that they will have a better solution in future models. There are also lots of pluses for the Genesis design. You get very large spikes which can help when used on the ground, although the rubber feet needs to be removed and kept in a secure place so you won't lose them. Maybe Genesis can add a small rubber part that will prevent this from getting lost. The C3 can go down very low to the ground. You can actually get below 20 centimeters, without the head of course, which is very nice for a tripod that can go up to 180 centimeters tall when fully open. The only downside is that in order to get down you need to remove the center column, but also add an extra piece which comes with the tripod in the included bag. We would really prefer if this would not be necessary. Talking about the bag, it is the most well-protected tripod bag of any manufacturer that we have got to date, including much more expensive tripods. This is great, but some people might think that this is too much if they want to stay light. But there are always other ways to carry a tripod, and there is an included strap which is always useful. Another cool feature which the C3 includes, and at least so far none of the other tripods that we received for the review series has, is the ability to remove one leg and turn it into a monopod. This can actually save you money on buying a monopod, and since the leg is so light and made out of carbon fiber, it's actually a great deal. Like some of the previous features that we have mentioned, we have just one issue with the monopod option. Instead of just releasing the leg and connecting the head to it, you also need to disconnect the center column and connect it to the leg and then connect the head. This takes extra time and makes the part of the leg with the foam a bit too low for our taste. Again, we feel that Genesis needs to come up with a way around this so that you can connect the head directly to the leg. Talking about the foam, you have this on just one leg, unlike some tripods which have this on two or even all three of the legs. Still, this is nice to have, and you can always buy foam cover and add it up later. So let's sum things up. As we mentioned briefly in the opening part of this video, we basically knew nothing about Genesis before we did this review. But our first impression of this relatively new brand is very positive. We usually keep the talk of pricing for the very end, but in this case we actually wanted to give it a little bit earlier, as it really helps to put things in perspective. The C3 kit, which includes a tripod, head, and a very padded case, costs just under $225. For what we see as a more than a decent carbon fiber tripod and a basic but very usable head, this is considered very affordable. Add 6 years of warranty and you have an entry-level price product that can compete favorably with quite a few mid-range offerings. This doesn't mean, of course, that the C3 is perfect. We mentioned in our review several drawbacks. Possibly the two major ones are the leg angle mechanism that needs improvement. Genesis is aware of that, and we hope to see improved mechanism in some future models, as well as the general stability, which also has some room for improvement. For most photographers on a budget, however, we don't feel that these drawbacks should be a deal breaker. You can improve stability effectively by adding weight under the tripod, and as far as the leg angle mechanism is concerned, we learn to live with it. And after playing with quite a few leg angle mechanisms for this review series, we can tell you that we have yet to see a perfect one, even at much higher price points. So this was our look at the C3 from Genesis, a very interesting entry-level tripod and head combination. You can read the full review of this on lensvid.com, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. On the next video, we're going to take a look at something very, very different. This is the CB38 from FLM, a German manufacturer, a very high-end bowhead. So stay tuned for that. See you on the next video.